Good evening and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Thursday the 9th of September and this is Scotland at 7. I'm Andrew Wilson and this evening I'm hosting the programme from Edinburgh. First we will look at today's coronavirus update, then I will introduce this evening's guest, and then together we will discuss the stories behind today's headlines. As of 2 p.m. today, since the start of the pandemic, a total of 2,912,655 people in Scotland have been tested through the NHS Scotland labs and the UK Government regional testing centres. Of these, 2,425,001 have been confirmed negative, and 487,654 have tested positive. There are 6,836 new cases of COVID-19 confirmed by a test, although not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. I'm sorry to say that there are 12 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 8,210. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 928 were in hospital last night, 87 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 a.m. this morning, 4,133,606 people had received their first dose of the COVID vaccination, and 3,757,337 had received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures show 133,841 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died of their illness, and that's an increase of 167 since yesterday. That number refers to deaths in all settings, not just hospitals. Now, we are lucky enough to be joined this evening by one of our regular contributors, the irrepressible galloping gourmet Clarkston's Chris McCusker. Chris, how are you doing this evening?
I'm absolutely flabbergasted by that introduction, Andrew, although it's slightly inaccurate because I now reside in Newton Mearns.
I'm flabbergasted as well, but Chris, it's great to see you this evening. Thank you for joining us.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Now, our first story is that a new poll has shown that the majority of people in Scotland would vote yes in an independence referendum and are supportive of the SNP's agreement with the Green Party. The opinion poll for Sky News shows that 51% of people surveyed said that they would vote for independence in a referendum. There was also backing for the new SNP Green Agreement, with 44% of people polled saying that the deal would be good for Scotland. Scots would also back the SNP if there was a Westminster general election tomorrow, with 51% saying that they would vote for the SNP, compared with 21% for the Tories, 17% Labour and 5% Lib Dems. Commenting, the SNP MSP Neil Gray said, "This poll demonstrates that the people of Scotland reject another decade of Tory austerity, back the SNP to deliver for them, and want to choose a different path as an independent country." As Brexit continues to bite and the Tories continue to punish hard-working families in Scotland and plunge thousands into poverty with their plans to cut universal credit in the middle of a pandemic, the SNP is bringing forward progressive policies to support those in need. The people of Scotland delivered a cast-iron mandate for a referendum for recovery. When the COVID crisis has passed, the people of Scotland must have the opportunity to choose their own future. So, Chris, coming ahead of both the SNP party conference this weekend and the Alba party conference this weekend, how do you think the news of this polling will go down?
I think it should be welcomed. I'm not too sure how it will go down because we've got various unionist reporters on television. There was one on Jeremy Vine who was citing a poll which said, 75% of Scotland are in favour of the union. I don't know what feckin' poll she was reading, but it's, certainly not the one that we're paying attention to tonight. But it's encouraging to see that there's another poll in favour of independence, and especially in a week such as this week, where the UK government have announced a regressive tax, they've abandoned refugees, and they've taken the climate comments out of its post-Brexit grubbiness, hardline deals and stuff like that. It actually shows that Scots are sitting up and taking notice, and are wanting to go in a different direction.
Well, that's absolutely right, Chris. We can see from this week alone the star performers from the Westminster Cabinet, Mr. Johnson, probably Priti Patel, and probably this week's star performer, as I say, the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson. It's not a surprise that these guys are fantastic recruiting sergeants for the cause of independence.
Well, Gavin Williamson fast becoming England's answer to Mr. Magoo, because he doesn't know who he's actually addressing, and and what they do, and all the rest of it. So, Scotland are sick, tired, and taking lectures from these self-serving bureaucrats that are just looking to line their own pockets. Because make no mistake, at the end of the day, that was the whole purpose of Brexit. It wasn't about taking back control or being a sovereign state or any of that fancy nonsense. It was all about money, and it'll always ever be where the Tories are concerned, only ever about money.
Absolutely right. It crosses my mind. Do you think if we tell Gavin Williamson that you're Gordon Ramsay, we'll get you an interview with him as well?
Well, I honestly, I don't mean to blow my own trumpet, but I famously rebuked Mr. Ramsay when he opened the One Devonshire Gardens, and he offered me a job there, basically because I said to him, "There's no way that me and you could work together."
Well, I think without diverting, I think they're about to open in Edinburgh, so you maybe get another job offer. You never know.
He can go and shove it. I'll stick to working with my good friend. I'll stick to working with my good friend Hardeep Singh Kohli.
Perfect. Well, that's a good point. But to come back to this story, you mentioned that what I think was a poll for a YouGov poll for Scotland and Union, which has been getting some press this week. But I think, would it be fair to say that this Sky News poll has really blown that distraction out the water?
Well, yeah, and I tell you why you're correct in saying that, because this eminent English Britnat journalist, I think her name's Carol Green, I think it's the Telegraph or the Times or some right-wing Tory chat anyway. She was, lying or languishing about in Jeremy Vine's couch, which is another. I don't know how to describe it. It's not exactly a news program, but it's certainly not exactly a comedy. But then again, it could be viewed as one. But they roll these experts out, these self-opinionated middle-aged Englanders in order to champion the union, and they come out with some complete and utter mince. Thinking that they know all about Scotland and and what's going on up here, without taking into consideration, as I said, the regressive tax that the Tories have introduced, the hostile attitude towards refugees, how successively Scottish constituents have been shafted by Westminster. And there is just no, they have constantly got the Union Jack spectacles on and just cannot see through it.
No, absolutely right, Chris. Well, what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit more about the tax hikes we've seen this week, because the SNP has said that Scotland must get every penny it is due from the increase in national insurance, as polling shows that the majority of Scots oppose the regressive tax. Polling by YouGov conducted on the 7th of September shows a majority, 58% of Scots, oppose the national insurance rise, 61% think it is unfair, and more than two-thirds, 70%, think it is unacceptable for Boris Johnson to break the Tory manifesto pledge. Separately, polling by Opinion conducted on the 7th and 8th of September shows that 47% of Scots oppose the national insurance rise, compared to 30% who support it, while two-thirds, 66%, believe it is unfair, compared to a third who believe it is fair. It comes as the overwhelming majority of Scotland's MPs voted against the move last night, with the exception of the 6 Scottish Tory MPs who rubber-stamped Boris Johnson's tax hike, despite other Tory MPs in England voting against or abstaining. Commenting, the SNP's Shadow Chancellor Alison Thewlis MP said Boris Johnson's regressive Tory tax hike will penalise Scottish families, low and middle income workers and the young, forcing the poorest in society to subsidise the wealthiest. Everyone supports more money for our NHS and social care, but it would have been far better to do this in a progressive way that fairly reflects wealth. Instead, this Tory poll tax will penalise people like care workers, while millionaires with unearned wealth will contribute nothing. So, Chris, it certainly crossed my mind last night that the most junior of nurses, for example, will now find themselves paying more, and as Alison Thewlis says, subsidising those who exist on unearned wealth, which is not touched by national insurance. So, how do you think that this having been passed in Westminster, how do you think it's going to continue to play in Scotland?
Well, it's going to play badly. It's going to play, probably worse than the poll tax, which was introduced by Thatcher. But to put it in layman terms, if you own one house, you will pay more. If you own 6 houses, you will pay less. It's as simple as that. And that highlights the stark inequality of this regressive tax, and it's typical because it's a capitalist agenda, obviously. But Alison Thewlis again, always right. I saw her standing up to Andrew Bowie during the week, and ably backed up by Dr. Philippa Whitford as well, and shot the poor chap down in flames. As he was ranting on about nurses and doctors and stuff like that. And it's one subject that you just do not broach with any authority when you're talking to Dr. Whitford, because Philippa could just lose you in a dark night. It's she knows the medical profession inside out. But getting back to the crux of the matter, for the lower lower paid families, the working poor in Scotland at this moment in time are going to be worse off. And even those who are not able to work, again, this is on top of the £20 cut in the universal credit. It's just Westminster's clearly not playing ball, and it's ever increasing that the Tories have no intention of building a fair recovery out of COVID. Make no mistake, it's the survival of the fittest, and if the fittest have got the more money, then they're going to survive long before anybody is. The people who are already relying on food banks, because make no mistake, there are people who are actually working who actually go to food banks. It's just because you've got a job doesn't mean to say you're able to shop in Waitrose or anything like that. It's the fact that wages have stagnated under this government, and no matter the rhetoric about putting up the minimum wage and all the rest of it, again, it's all complete mince. And if Scotland doesn't make its choice to be an independent country, we're going to be another 10 years of Tory austerity.
No, absolutely, Chris. It also crossed my mind here that it seemed curious that if in the event that the Barnett consequentials that are paid to the Scottish government as a result of this national insurance, this unwelcome and unwanted national insurance hike, in the event that it's being suggested that the Barnett consequentials will in some way be ring fenced by Westminster as having to be spent on the SNHS and having to be spent on social care in Scotland. It struck me as odd that of all organisations, the Tory Party were starting to try and apparently step into discussions about the Scottish NHS and social care when it's clear that they have the only plans that they have for social care in the NHS in England is to continue privatising them and continue directing funds to the private sector without much concern for the quality of care or for those who are receiving care. So why do you think the Tories have stepped into this by firstly by breaking a manifesto pledge not to raise national insurance, and then secondly starting to get involved in the context of the health service in Scotland and social care in Scotland, where you would think they would be comparatively weak?
Well, what they're doing there is the fact that, by ring fencing that money, which is to be earmarked and spent within the auspices of the NHS in Scotland, and we've already got plans to integrate social care, what have you. That's absolutely fine, But what they don't want us to do is, and what they keep complaining about, is the fact that they reckon that we're taking money out of that Barnett budget in order to spend on other projects, which is quite right. But what they're basically saying is the fact that all this money that's going to come to you extra, free gratis, courtesy of Westminster, which again is a load of mince, because at the end of the day, every Scottish person is going to be paying towards that £1 billion. So it's not free. You and I, it'll come out of our pockets, it'll come out of the viewers' pockets, it'll come out of everybody's pockets in Scotland. So that money's just going down to Westminster, getting flushed round and then sent back up again. So it's our money to start with, and we should be able to spend that wherever we see fit. But because that they can ring fence it and say that it must be spent, on the NHS and all the rest of it, or else there'll be words or something. I don't know what they could do about it. But it is time and time again, the Tories always point out that money's been diverted from this, that, and the next thing in order for other projects. But that's what any competent government will do. It will look sensibly at where they can use money to mitigate other cuts that are happening, all throughout the actual policy areas. So, when the Labour are sitting on one side and they're calling for, the child attainment and stuff like that, and whatnot, and what have you, and child poverty to be, redressed, then it's no wonder that the Scottish government can actually, in more ways than one, actually, the Scottish Labour called for the child payment to be £5, and then we doubled it up to £10. And now this year we're doubling it up to £20. But again, that's not enough for Anna Sawar. He wants it to go further than that. So every time that we actually double what they're asking for, they ask for more again. But again, it's got to come from somewhere. Do you know what I mean? And as long as we're in this union, we are well within our rights in order to use their money, because it is our money that goes down and gets slushed back up anyway.
Absolutely right, Chris. Thank you. We'll move on now, and we'll move on to a COVID story. The Scottish Parliament has approved the use of coronavirus vaccination certificates to enter some events and higher risk venues. MSPs voted in favour of the measure, which will come into effect on Friday the 1st of October. aimed at reducing risk while maximising our ability to keep open certain settings and events where transmission is a higher risk and also encouraging uptake of the vaccine. Coronavirus vaccination certificates will be required to enter events such as nightclubs, music festivals, and some football grounds. Staff at venues affected will be able to download a Verifier app to a smartphone or device from next week ahead of the launch, which will allow digital checks on the certification status of those attending. Guidance will be provided for venues on how to use the app, along with options to integrate it into their own systems as the source code is open. Health Secretary Hamza Yusuf said, "We must do all that we can to stem the rise in cases, and vaccine certification will form part of a range of measures which can help us to do this. It will only be used in certain higher risk settings, and we hope that this will allow businesses to remain open and prevent any further restrictions as we head into autumn and winter." Public behaviour, including key protective measures like face coverings, physical distancing, hand washing and isolating when necessary, continue to play a vital role in reducing the prevalence of the virus and helping us to emerge from the pandemic. The new scheme is not being introduced until all Scottish adults have had the opportunity to receive both doses of the vaccine and 2 weeks have passed to allow the vaccine to take effect. The Scottish Government continues to work with sectors affected to ensure that a workable and proportionate scheme is developed. Under 18s and adults who are ineligible for vaccination will be exempt. So, Chris, we're beginning to get a little bit more detail now from the Scottish Government with regard to the coronavirus vaccination certificates and their use. What's your, now that we're getting a little bit more detail, what's your response to their introduction for their use in events such as nightclubs, music festivals, and some football grounds?
Well, I mean, I'm obviously past the age of going to nightclubs, but quite clearly Michael Gove isn't. So perhaps he could tell Douglas Ross exactly what a nightclub is, because Michael Gove obviously knows what a nightclub is. My understanding of a nightclub is, one where you would go to, drink copious amount of alcohol till about 3 o'clock in the morning. Other substances are obviously available, and a pub could close as late as 1 o'clock. So I mean, that is it's as black as white as that. I mean, I go to the Record Factory. There are other establishments, but I go to the Record Factory. It's the home of the Glasgow Liverpool Supporters Club. We'll watch the match. We'll have a couple of beers, and we won't be throwing out at 11:30. It's got a late license. Many establishments in Glasgow do have late licenses till 12 o'clock, 12:30, 1 o'clock. But the ones that have later licenses, which cater for 250 people plus, you can get 250 people in the Record Factory, but it's predominantly there for dancing, so it's pretty clear to me, the actual distinctions where the Scottish Government want to use this. It's, of places of a nature where large crowds will gather. And the First Minister was at pains to point out again to Anna Salwar, because he's just as thick as Douglas Ross, that he couldn't understand why they were being introduced. And the First Minister said, well, at the end of the day, if you have an area where there's people mostly unvaccinated, and no proof, as opposed to an area where people are vaccinated and they have got proof, then obviously you would feel safer in the former and not the latter. So I mean, it seems pretty clear cut to me, the fact that we're trying to do all that we can in order to keep the public safe and in order for these businesses to continue in their trade, so that they don't suffer another closure due to lockdown. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Of course, Chris. Of course. Now, I appreciate your undertaking there not to be joining Michael Gove on the dance floor anytime soon. But if I can get you to cast your mind back to, not that far back, but cast your mind back to your dancing days, do you think that the introduction of this vaccine certification process is going to encourage young people to step forward and get vaccinated in larger numbers?
I think so. Yeah, definitely. And going back a fair distance, there were clubs that were open to you when you were 18. But then there was better clubs that were open to you when you were 21. Do you know what I mean? And, so you always had that certification with you, and especially obviously on your 21st. You know what I mean? When you could get into places like Maestros and stuff like that in the town. There we go. You're right. I'm showing my age now. Maestros, Jesus. But yeah, so I mean, it was pretty much a guarantee. It's just another layer. I think it was Linda Bald. I think she said, "Look, it's just another tool in the armory against COVID. It's not going to be used as some sort of people watcher or people marker or anything such as that. You're going to have to need it, if you want to do international travel." My youngest son, Scott, he's going out to Poland next Friday. So he's got to get it done and stuff like that and all the rest of it. Because at the end of the day, what Scotland are doing, what Douglas Ross fails to understand, because actually it's fair to point out to the viewers the fact that he voted against it in Holyrood, but he voted alongside with his Lord and Master at Westminster. So, there's something that happens to Douglas Ross's voting intentions when he passes Gretna Green. He seems to throw them out the window. But, going back to what I was saying, the salient point in this is the fact that these QR codes are usable in Europe. So, therefore, going forward, Scottish Government are actually doing work now, thinking ahead for maybe next year when it is safer for people to travel. Go for a week in the sun or something like that in the Algarve, is the fact that they have got it ready, they're waiting, and it's already, we would have had a good 3-6 months lead time and, possibly working out any flaws that are in the system, which can be, obviously highlighted. There's a big music festival happening at the weekends. There's big football matches up and coming in Scotland. So, any of these anomalies will be highlighted, well before that.
Thanks, Chris. And just one last question on this topic. And briefly, it crossed my mind that the vote today broke very much along party lines. However, after the introduction of the Butte House Agreement between the SNP and the Scottish Greens, that meant that the Scottish Government had a working majority, and this legislation could be passed without the challenges that I think perhaps it's fair to say the Scottish Government saw towards the end of the last Parliament. Do you think that getting this legislation through today, in the face of attacks and criticism from the Lib Dems and Scotland's leading schizophrenic Douglas Ross, do you think that this legislation this vote having been passed today, it's an indication that the Butte House Agreement's going to stick?
I think, it's definitely that. And by the way, there's more than one schizophrenic in that party, because we've got, there was one, I can't remember who it was, she's that insignificant, but, she took exception that Mr. Matheson pointing at her, to which I had to point out to her that and ask her what her opinion was when her Tory colleagues down in Westminster were inviting Ian Blackford to commit suicide. Again, aside from that, we also had another one of them calling the Green MPs country bumpkins.
Yes.
That it's really childish. It's really churlish. It's not helping, progressive politics. But to get back to your original point, And what I was wanting to point out is the fact that I think this would have passed even without the Butte House Agreement, because we've had a close working relationship with the Greens, because they are, pretty much, centred along the same lines, obviously, independence and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I think it reinforces it. That would be the best way to actually put it, Andrew.
Lovely. Great. Thanks, Chris. We'll move on now to another principally Westminster story, and that is that Priti Patel's plans to send back small boats carrying migrants in the English Channel are already dead in the water, an immigration workers' trade union has said. Border Force staff are being trained to employ turnaround tactics at sea under plans developed for 2 years, a statement from the Home Office said overnight. But Lucy Morton, the professional officer at the Immigration Services Union, said she would be surprised if the policy, announced as a criticism of the government's social care reform was mounting, was used even once. The proposals, which will be in breach of international maritime law, have been rejected already by the French government. Morton said, "These are understandably a lot of constraints around it, and you cannot do this with a vessel that is in any way vulnerable, and more importantly, you need the consent of the French government to do it." Tim Loughton, a Conservative MP and a member of the Home Affairs Select Committee, also poured cold water on the prospects of the tactic being used in practice, although supported the underlying principle. He said, "Any boat coming up alongside at speed would capsize most of these boats anyway, and then we're looking at people getting into trouble in the water and drowning, and then we'll get blamed for that. It sounds good pushing them back, but it's not going to work in practice." The French Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin, rejected the proposals on the grounds that safeguarding human lives at sea takes priority over considerations of nationality, status, or migration policy. So, Chris, first of all, it strikes me. I'm surprised, but encouraged by Tim Loughton's intervention today, pointing out some fairly basic health and safety facts that would be apparent to most of us. But do you think it's the case that Priti Patel she secretly might enjoy the idea that migrants would potentially be made put at greater risk, even greater risk, and be made to suffer if these tactics were employed?
Well, before I get on to Priti Patel, I have to take exception to Lucy Morton's use of words. I think dead in the water is a hellish thing to be associating with migrants trying to cross the channel, because it has, obviously happened before. So I think that's an unfortunate phrase of words. I understand why she used it, but again, I would have taken a second thought about that. On to Priti Patel, I'm sorry, I have no words of wisdom for that woman. She is, an evil, vile person with no empathy and no compassion whatsoever. And which is strange, because herself being a refugee fleeing Uganda under Idi Amin's regime, this is just something that I just can't get my head around. I really, really don't understand the way that she thinks, the way that how she processes her thoughts towards anybody of possibly the same skin colour as herself. I find it really, really bizarre. But again, I have to point out as well that the UN special rapporteur on migrant rights, Felipe González Morales, had said that the UK, had plans that would prevent the right to seek asylum, and it would also affect children. Now, this is again was also highlighted the fact that you have to actually be in the country in order to seek asylum. So therefore, if you're outside the country, as in international waters, you're not an asylum seeker, you are a refugee. Therefore, you are a person of European origins. So that therefore, the whole UN Convention of Human Rights come into play, and for the Priti Patel to be attacking international citizens, and again, there's no reason why. Well, I think there's every reason why the French government are up in arms about this, because the French, and make no mistake, because I've been there, the French are not the most hospitable people when it comes to refugees. But I tell you one thing, they are far more hospitable than the UK government, that's for sure. Again, the French have stepped up to the plate. They have done over and above the call of duty. As far as the UK government are concerned, not obviously as far as I'm concerned, they haven't done enough. But that's neither here nor there. So, they are in no position to take lectures from, a hideous racist such as Priti Patel that actually wants to, turn boats back in international waters where her boats shouldn't actually be. Thing at the end of the day, she's getting into a territory that she knows nothing about. And I've actually seen, and take heart from this, because I'll be watching this story very closely, that I've actually seen comments, cited in the Guardian, just so that the producer doesn't have a heart attack. But she is the leading person to be demoted in Boris Johnson's new up-and-coming reshuffle. Such as her ineptitude. She's already been sacked once, so Christ, why not sack her again?
Yep. It's a good point. I was going to ask about the politics of it, Chris, just briefly. I was wondering whether this was this was part of a double whammy from Priti Patel this week, perhaps because she wants to raise her profile. Firstly, by this announcement, indicating that she's prepared to turn up the wicker to make Theresa May's, as you say, hostile environment even more hostile, which most of us wouldn't have believed was possible. And then on top of that, she's also whistling to a certain base of supporters. If by implementing this policy, she's prepared to break the UK's treaty obligations under the International Convention on Safety of Life at Sea, a thing called SOLAS 74. So she wants to break treaty undertakings that the UK has signed, and she wants to be even more hostile to immigrants. Do you think this might be, there's politics at play here as well?
Well, there's a certain amount of politics at play as well, but even and viewers might be horrified to hear me say this, but I even think that Boris Johnson is, quietly recoiling at the language that she's using and the rhetoric as well, which is coming out, which again doesn't help his actual agenda of building back better than all the rest of it. This has gone beyond taking back control. I might get shot for this. I really don't know, but this is in the realms of Eva Braun. Do you know what I mean? This person is just a hideous, odious person. Again, I stand by what I said at the start. I just really, really cannot comprehend her lack of empathy and compassion. It's just absolute. Irregardless of skin colour, irregardless of where they come from, and all the rest of it, forget about international politics. We are talking about a human life, and that is just contemptible to even think that you can play with a human life.
That's the bottom line, Chris. Absolutely. So with that in mind, we will stop talking about the Home Secretary, and instead we'll talk about the news today that EU nationals living in the UK who apply to change their status risk being rejected by landlords, employers, and mortgage lenders because of an anomaly on the digital residency permits which are being issued by the Westminster government. Before these people can access public or financial services, EU nationals have to prove that they have been granted either settled or pre-settled status by the Home Office. Pre-settled status, which has been granted to nearly 2.3 million people who were resident in the UK by the 31st of December 2020, can be upgraded to settled status after someone has lived continuously in the country for 5 years. However, when someone applies for the upgrade, the confirmation that they have pre-settled status is automatically removed from their online permit, leaving them unable to prove that they are legally in the UK. One Hungarian national, who preferred not to be named, faces losing the house he is buying with his girlfriend because his mortgage lender refuses to accept his permit as evidence of his right to live in the UK. He was granted pre-settled status in 2019, but when he applied for settled status in April, his existing status was removed from his online permit. It now merely shows a certificate of application. An Italian policy analyst, whose house purchase was also jeopardised when his pre-settled status was wiped from his permit, said he was informed by the Home Office help desk that it was a technical glitch. Callers to the helpline face hours on hold without result, however. The campaign group The 3 Million, which champions the rights of EU residents in the UK, has reported the issue to the Independent Monitoring Authority for the Citizens' Rights Agreement, a public body. It said it has heard from individuals who risk losing their job because their pre-settled status is no longer visible. The online system also fails to show when applicants are appealing a rejected application. Instead, it simply states that an application has been refused. So, Chris, firstly, in the context of the hostile environment we were talking about a moment ago, it appears that Brexit is the gift that keeps on giving and keeps on picking on people and making life even more hostile and even more difficult. Do you think there are ways left for the Home Office to find ways to make people's lives even more miserable?
Well, yeah. Listen, look, the two people that you cited there, the Hungarian gentleman and the Italian gentleman. I can't remember the Hungarian. I think the Italian gentleman was a policy development something or other. It suggests to me that both of them. Yeah. It suggests to me that both of them were sort of like IT blue chip workers. Possibly, I would hasten to take a guess at between 65,000 and 95,000 a year. So what I'm pointing out here is the fact that this policy is not just attacking migrants, who are manually skilled. This policy is across the board, and it is attacking people that are, I don't want to say highly skilled because that's possibly not correct, but you know where I'm driving at, right? It's not just the fact that they are, contributing to society, because both of the gentlemen in question were, talking about buying, houses. You're buying a house south of Carlisle. You're looking at, from £170,000 upwards, and most of the areas, obviously with the exception of some deprived areas in the old red wall, shall we say. But on average, median prices normally start around 170,000. So in order to buy a house of that, you have to be, working sort of like, blue collar, IT, middle sort of like earner in the eyes. And again, this is just a blanket cut off, which is on the government website. That actually takes away people's rights without actually informing that they've taken away people's rights, because they don't actually know until they deselect the first status and then select the preferred status that they want in order to obviously progress their mortgage, and then they go to the mortgage advisor, hand over the documentation, and then he looks at it and says, "Oh no, wait a minute, this doesn't say that you're, pre anything." Do you know what I mean? So it's leaving people in limbo. I know in some cases people, I think it was a Hungarian chap that was saying that he was on the telephone for hours and stuff like that without any sort of like, any further information, whatnot, have you. In certain circumstances, these people will just go, oh, to hell with that. I think I'll just pack my bags and go back to Hungary. Do you know what I mean?
Understandably, Chris. Understandably.
And this would happen, ad hoc.
Yeah. Absolutely. But Chris, we'll move now to a story that I know is particularly close to your heart at the moment. And that's that the Westminster government's response towards families evacuated from Afghanistan to the UK has been chaotic and uncoordinated, hampering volunteers' efforts to help, charities have said. One hotel where 50 babies were in quarantine with their families after fleeing the Taliban had no formula milk, they said. In other hotels, supplies of clothes, toiletries and nappies donated by the public were turned away by managers who had no staff to distribute them. There have already been reports of Afghan families resorting to shoplifting nappies and other essentials because of a lack of any government support. The charities and voluntary organisations are part of the Voluntary and Community Sector Emergencies Partnership, which was asked by the Home Office to coordinate help for those evacuated from Kabul. More than 10,000 Afghans, including thousands of children, were in quarantine hotels after the largest evacuation in living memory, the government said last week. They are now being moved into at least 70 bridging hotels or other accommodation, according to VCSEP. Lawrence Smith, the founder of the Lewisham Donation Hub, said they had been working around the clock as part of the nationwide response, delivering supplies to hotels around Heathrow and Luton airports and in London over the past 10 days. Excuse me. He said, "There's no logistics, no information sharing, that's evident. It's chaotic. People in hotels are experiencing real need, but hotel managers are saying, we've got aid, but we've got no one to sort it and get it to the rooms." Smith's volunteer organisation, operating from office space donated by Lewisham Council, has been working blind, he said, without access to official lists of quarantine or bridging hotels, the numbers of families inside, or anyone's gender or age. Many Afghans have had to leave everything behind, including clothing. Last weekend, Smith received an emergency request from React, a disaster response charity, to deliver formula milk to a hotel housing 50 babies. He was able to find enough milk for half that number and had it delivered the same evening. So, Chris, firstly, quickly, in respect to your own fundraising activities, how's the crowdfunder progressing? And then we'll talk about this story.
Well, very quickly, because I know that we're up against the clock. The crowdfunder was launched and immediately attained the £500 target, and now it's happily sitting at £1,330, thanks to the generous constituents of Scotland, viewers of Broadcasting Scotland as well. I have to give credit as well to Indie Live, because they also helped as well spread the word, and also the Scottish National as well. So I'm very grateful to everybody that's chipped in, and looking to open our own distribution hub in Clarkson very soon. Perhaps I'll talk about that on another evening once we're up and running. But getting back to the main issue of the fact that there's, there seems to be a lack of coordination on the ground, and again, it's just shoddy, cobbled together arrangement done by the UK government. Which I think obviously Priti Patel must have had to go and lie down in a darkened room when she was told by Boris Johnson that we were going to let in X amount of families at any given one time without even being challenged. So at the end of the day, there are networks available. We, Eastwood Refugee Aid, we feed in alongside SAFER and alongside Refugee, as well as we're good friends at Care for Cali, who incidentally actually are supporting Afghan refugees the length and breadth of the UK, from Birmingham, Bradford, Leeds area as well, Manchester and all the rest of it, right the way down to Heathrow, where obviously some of the Holden hotels are as well. You know, it's the coordination, and also the fact that they have to take into consideration as well the religious background of some of these people. You know, the some of the food that people are actually handing in might not be,
Of course.
compatible, obviously, towards their food intake. But
Of course.
you know, I mean, baby milk's a universal thing. And you know, I would urge people at Boots and stuff like that, Tesco's, Sainsbury's, all the rest of it, to dig deep and really help, because at the end of the day, again, no surprise for me, Andrew. You know, when I say it's the fact that it's human life we're talking about, and that's just the baseline.
Absolutely, Chris. As you say, that's the bottom line. We'll move on to another story now, and that's that Health Secretary Humza Yousaf has announced a new £10 million long COVID support fund to help health boards respond to the condition. The announcement follows Mr Yousaf meeting a range of healthcare professionals at Eastwood Health and Care Centre in East Renfrewshire and speaking with patient Pamela Bell, who has been receiving support for long COVID since she contracted the virus almost a year ago. The Long COVID Support Fund is designed to maximise and improve the coordination of a broad range of existing services across the health and social care system and third sector in response to the condition. It will be a flexible fund that will be tailored to local needs. It will strengthen the range of information and advice available and ensure the right support is available within primary care, providing a response focused on each patient's needs with referrals to secondary care when necessary. Mr Yousaf said, "We know that long COVID can't be handled with a one-size-fits-all approach. It can be complex and involve an array of diverse symptoms and combinations of those symptoms. The new Long COVID Support Fund will give our NHS boards the flexibility to design and deliver the best care for those with long COVID, tailored to the specific needs of their populations." So, Chris, it strikes me that the Health Secretary today has been pointing out the benefits of designing and delivering solutions to people as close as possible to those people in order that they are the best solutions. What struck you about the announcement of the long COVID support fund today?
Well, again, you know, what initially struck me is the fact that you're hearing this announcement from the Scottish Government. I've yet to hear any announcement from the UK Government with regards long
Yeah.
COVID. You know, I have to take exception if Humza Yousaf been in my constituency without informing me.
Good point, Chris. Good point. Well made.
Actually,
no, that's okay.
actually, his mother-in-law just lives over the back. He normally pops in for a cup of tea and a catch-up, you know, and all the rest of it. So
I'm
he'll
sure
get a
we're going
rap
to
in the
see.
knuckles for that.
I'm sure he will. We'll move on to the next story now, and that's that an advisory board to support the development of groundbreaking human rights legislation met for the first time today. Equalities Minister Christina McKelvey chaired the group that will play a key role in progressing the Human Rights Bill. The new bill, outlined in the latest programme for government, will be introduced in this parliamentary session and will give effect in Scots law to a wide range of internationally recognised human rights. This bill follows on from the work of the First Minister's Advisory Group for Human Rights and the recommendations of the National Task Force for Human Rights Leadership. Ms McKelvey said, "The Scottish Government is committed to ensuring everyone in our society can live with human dignity and enjoy their rights in full." So, Chris, you've mentioned a couple of times this evening that the bottom line, the baseline, is the protection and is the respect and the protection of human life and of human beings. What strikes you from this announcement of the plans to begin to introduce more human rights and internationally recognised human rights directly into Scots law?
Well, I tell you, again, I wish we had more time. I wish I'd spent less time on, worthless people like Priti Patel and more time on this. It just shows Scotland where we can go with this. Because, what I need to point out about this is the fact that certain parts of this are going to be enshrined in Scots law where we can do so, because it is a reserved matter, so we have to do it within the devolved settlement. So we can only go as far as we can go within the constraints of Westminster, we would want to go further. I believe, Christina McKelvey's a wonderful champion for human rights. Honestly, this is the baseline, and the only way is up as far as I'm concerned, because from this we can take a different step and a different attitude towards human rights as opposed to the attitude that's taken currently by this Westminster cabal.
Perfect. Of course, Chris. Thank you. And now we'll touch very quickly on our final story tonight, and that's that with just over 50 days to go until COP26 comes to Glasgow, details of Scotland's COP26 community engagement programme have been announced. The programme of climate change activity will engage communities in the journey to net zero and empower them to take action. It will include activity targeted at communities that have not previously engaged in climate action, helping to make Scotland's COP26 engagement inclusive. The programme also includes activity for young people, including schools and youth groups, such as the guiding and scouting movements, to help ensure children and young people from all backgrounds can participate. Scotland's climate festivals will support local communities to plan and deliver their own festivals and events across the country. Keep Scotland Beautiful and the Glasgow Science Centre will lead on delivery, backed with almost £500,000 of Scottish Government funding. So, Chris, very quickly, are you feeling engaged now in COP26 in 50 days' time?
I've been engaged in the whole COP26 project, obviously, because the trade union group have been doing a lot of work on the just transition from the need for Scotland to adopt a just transition from fossil fuels to greener energy. So, I'm excited to see what comes out of this. Obviously, the Scottish Government, again, being grown up enough, and thinking outside the box, and asking kids to feed in, so that they can feel part of COP26. Because, make no mistake, COP26 is a big thing to happen in Glasgow. The whole side on by the Finnieston Cran is going to become a mini village. I believe it's in sort of like development at this moment in time, and it makes perfect sense to use the science centre just across the water and stuff like that. So to get engagement with the children, because obviously COP26 is all about them. Do you know what I mean? Because it's their world that we're leaving.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. And that is the news in Scotland at 7 this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. If you would like to support us, and we would like you to support us, then please consider subscribing or donating to Broadcasting Scotland. You will find the link to do that on the screen now. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, either behind the scenes or in front of the cameras or in any other way that helps our work and promotes the station, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. Meantime, we will be here tomorrow at 7 o'clock with the next edition of Scotland at 7, so please tune in and join us then. Very many thanks to Chris for joining us this evening and sharing his thoughts on wisdom and experience.
Once again, Andrew, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Chris. And so that's the way it is at very nearly Scotland at 8. Thank you for joining us on Broadcasting Scotland. I hope that you have a very peaceful evening.